Actually, a name I thought of, I should put this in the title. So the name of this Elements case study is being sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? I feel like that's a phrase that we've all heard at least once in our life. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? So that was me about a month ago. And generally, I'm a pretty healthy person. I really prioritize health and fitness. I'm constantly pursuing endurance related goals, training hard. And my life is such that I can kind of be selfish with my time for the most part and prioritize things like training around other work priorities. And so usually I don't have too hard of a time fitting in some long hours training with everything else. Um, but sometimes I need to be reminded that I'm only human and that I can't do everything that I want to do and expect to perform well and stay healthy. And so essentially what happened is that um, it's interesting. At the end of November, I moved to New York City. I live in Brooklyn now. Um, and New York City, of course, is a city that never sleeps. And my Garmin data would support that. Now, some of this might be because I started wearing a new Garmin watch that I got at the end of last year. And prior to that, I was wearing a Vivo Active, had been wearing that since 2019, so like 4 years. Um, and it was a great watch. I loved it, but I was just ready for an upgrade. The battery on that life, the battery life on my previous device was the main reason I was wanting a new one. And this one has a lot of cool features, but probably a lot of cool, just like updated technology and more accurate tracking. Because I find that this tracks my sleep so much more accurately than my old model did. Like it knows when I'm awake. If I'm just lying in bed watching TV, my old watch would often count that time as time in bed and sleeping, where somehow this watch seems to really know when I'm awake versus when I'm sleeping. Um, so that being said, it's made me realize that I don't sleep nearly as much as I thought I did. And the fact that I'm in New York City, the city that never sleeps, and have been really, excited and eager to experience a lot of new things and go out on school nights and just explore the city, has also led to some sacrifice of sleep. So what I'm going to do is share my screen and kind of bring you through what my recent months have been like in a brief sort of way, and then show you some things that I've been working on. Because in March, I really started to make a change. I was supposed to run a marathon in mid-March. I ended up getting sick at the end of February, so I pushed that back until this weekend. This weekend, I'm running the Queens Marathon, and it's the only time that I anticipate running a road marathon this year. And it's my one shot of the year at qualifying for Boston. So I want to have a great race. So basically, at the beginning of March, I decided like, that's it. I'm going to prioritize health and fitness and training and see if I can get my body to stay healthy, stop getting sick, heal up these injuries that I was dealing with, and see if I can get to that start line healthy and fit and see if I can have a great race. So, with all that being said, that's the context of everything. Probably too much context. Sorry for dragging that on. Um, let's share the entire screen. All right. And then I'm going to pull up, minimize this and move this. All right. So this is the Scissors platform that some of you may be familiar with. This is my own data. And this is what we call the month by month snapshot. So this is going from January of 2023 through March of 2024. And if you recall, I said that I moved to Brooklyn at the end of November of last year. And as you can see, all of last year, my average sleep duration was in the average of between 8 to 7 hours every single month. The average was actually 7.5 when I added it up. And then after I moved to Brooklyn, my sleep started to decline. In December, it was 7.2 hours. In January, it was 6.4. And in February, it was 6.1 hours. Now, my sleep quality has always remained relatively high from a percentage standpoint, if not even increasing. Part of that, though, might be because the um, denominator is getting smaller. So my total sleep is getting smaller. So the percentage jumps up. But it also might be that to me, like part of my takeaways from my recent experience is that there's aspects of light sleep that even if you're getting pretty decent amounts of deep sleep throughout the night, if you're not getting enough light sleep, getting that 7 hours that we know that, majority of adults need, um, then there might be some things within your recovery that are being missed and could potentially cause some problems. So, what really spurred me to make a change was at the end of January, I had got a really nasty flu. Did not seem to be COVID. I tested negative for it, and but it was pretty rough. I was down for the count for about a week, and then uh, got over that. Continued to kind of train, and then had some busy weeks throughout February with some family visiting, some traveling, some races that I did, and just a very busy month. And my sleep dropped even more. And at the very end of February, rolling into the beginning of March, I caught COVID. And so I got sick again. And that's when I was like, okay, clearly my body is telling me that, I'm someone who rarely gets sick. I get sick maybe every other year in terms of like catching the flu. I might catch a minor cold once a year or something like that, but usually I'm not like, need to like stay in bed all day type of sick, thankfully. But the fact that I'm in New York City, city that never sleeps, and the city that is 8 million people strong, and I'm taking public transit, so I'm just exposed to a lot more germs than I feel like, I used to be, which hopefully will be good for my immune system after it adapts, but it needs to adapt positively for that to happen. So I need to work on recover more. So in March, I really prioritize sleep and I really prioritize fuel. You can see I still have some work to do. I'm not someone who's ever like needed a ton of sleep per se, like 7 hours for me, like I feel great. It's hard for me to get 8 hours. Like I think some of these 8 and 8.3 and beginning of last year were sort of device error issues. Now that I'm wearing a new device that seems to be more accurate. I could be wrong though. Um, but I would love to get this number above 7. I'm really trying to, but it is kind of hard for me to stay in bed longer than 7 hours. So at any rate, I got 6.7 in March, and you can see that that had a major impact on my stress scores. So in February, my average daily stress score was 30.2, and then in March it was 25.7. That was close to the lowest it's been over the past year. I had a couple other months where the average was lower than that, but it was one of the lowest it's been. And I hit a PR over the past year for my average daily body battery max. So the average that my body, if you're not familiar with body battery, it's basically a measure of how much energy you have related to your stress. Specifically, it looks at heart rate variability and how active you are throughout the day. Um, and how well you recover at night. So ideally, you want to start your day at 100%. That's pretty tough to do, though. In general, when I'm working with my clients, I kind of, granted, I'll be honest, this is kind of an arbitrary number, but just in looking at other people's data, I set 75% as sort of like a basic threshold of where I like to see people at or above in terms of their average daily body battery max. And so in February, my average daily max was 69%. And then in March, it jumped up to 87%, which was the highest it's been throughout the past, 15 months or so. I had some other months that were pretty close to that, but not any that quite that high. In addition to working on sleeping a bit more, I also worked on nutrition. So hopefully you'll see this screen that I'm pulling up. I love Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen Tracker. I've been using it for can off and on for probably 3 years, but pretty consistently for like the past 5 months or so, just out of curiosity. Like I was using this before I even really wanted to make a lifestyle change in March, which was kind of cool to be able to compare the data and see progress then. So you can see in January when I was just kind of following my normal habits and not paying too much attention to fuel, that these numbers are how many um, how many check marks I made in total for the entire month. If you're not familiar with the app, it is a free app. I highly recommend downloading it and checking it out. I think it's the easiest way to quantify the quality of your daily nutrition, which is not an easy thing to do. I think that app is so simple that simple is elegant, right? And I just really, really like it. That app has 24 check boxes that you could potentially mark off each day, 25 if you include the B12 vitamin supplement. But otherwise, 24 check boxes. Five of those are for 12 ounces of water each box, so 60 ounces of water a day, and one box for exercise. I should have like pulled up Dr. Greger Daily Dozen so you could kind of um, see if I can find that real quick. Um, so the reason I'm breaking all that down is because out of those 24 boxes per day, I don't know why it's taking so long to load. Um, 6 of them are related to water intake and exercise. So not really whole plant-based foods, but it's taking too long. That's okay though. So then you have 18 boxes that could qualify for whole plant-based foods, and each category has a different amount of boxes. For instance, there's beans, berries, fruits, vegetables, greens, cruciferous vegetables, flaxseed, um, and I might be missing one more, but overall, that's going to be 18 different boxes. And most days, I almost always get exercise and all my water intake. It's not that hard for me to knock those out. So then that would mean though, if I'm consistently getting those, then any increase I see per month is probably going to be due to eating more whole plant-based foods. So in January, there was 31 days, I had 407 check boxes. That average is about 13. So 13 check boxes per day, which my standard goal used to be 12. I wanted to be above at least 12. In February, I bumped that up a little bit unintentionally, really. I got up to 425 total, which was about 14 and a half check boxes per day. So we can say that I probably ate about 1.5 more servings of whole plant-based foods in February, but still was getting sick at the end of February. So then I tried to really double down in March. And my new goal was to try to hit 18 or more on average. And I ended up averaging 19 and a half servings of whole plant-based, well, 19 and a half, not servings, that's a lot. 19 and a half check boxes compared to 14 and a half in February. That's 5 more servings of whole plant-based foods per day, which is pretty significant. And I also thought the number 19 and a half was interesting because, you know, if we think about being, perfect, like let's theoretically say getting all 24 boxes is perfect. That's the ideal thing we're going for. Well, no one is perfect all the time. And I've often heard Mike in the past talk about this idea of being an 81 percenter when it comes to nutrition, meaning that 90% of the time you eat 90% plant-based. If you add those percentages up or multiply them 90% by 90%, that equals 81%. And if you take 19 and a half and divide it by 24, that equals 81%. So you could say that in March, I ate 90% whole food plant-based, 90% of the time, or, easier said, 81% of the time. I'm sure that doesn't actually add up exactly if I were to like look at my nutrition, more specifically from like a calorie percentage. But nonetheless, you can definitely see that I increased my intake of whole plant-based foods. And then I had those awesome results. Let me go back to that scissors page of seeing my stress scores drop significantly. At the beginning of March too, right when I got COVID, I started to develop um, what felt to me like a bone stress reaction in my femur and like the shaft of my femur, which is definitely not something to mess around with. I work with a lot of runners. I've dealt with bone stress injuries myself personally. I've dealt with them with clients, and it's definitely a type of injury that you want to be more cautious with. So that's really what spurred me to push that marathon off into the future to see if I can get healthy. And I've actually been amazed at how well I've been able to gradually progressed my training coming off COVID, as well as coming off that bone stress reaction. So I no longer have any symptoms of a bone stress injury in my thigh. I'm hopeful that that was just kind of a reaction. I think it's interesting, like in my own experience, sometimes when I'm having an immune response in my body, old injuries and aches and pains will kind of flare up. Um, and I sometimes wonder, is it put it like this? One of my takeaways from this experience has been, let me stop sharing my scissors data with you too. One of my takeaways is that in my own experience and in the experience of clients that I work with, I often find that when we think about musculoskeletal injury, I feel like it's rarely training loads that are the culprit that lead to an injury when we think about this balance between move and fuel and recover, right? Usually people are pretty reasonable with how they approach training, and especially if they have some specific goal in mind that they're working towards. Um, but nonetheless, like when you're pushing your fitness, things can happen. And injuries are a natural part of, trying to build a more resilient system. Um, but I often find that it's not training loads that's necessarily the issue. It's the other part of your ecosystem and lifestyle. Are you recovering enough at night? What's your sleep like? What's your stress management like? How are you fueling? Are you fueling with high quality foods? Are you having enough fuel? Are you fueling sufficiently for the exercise that you're doing? All of those things to me generally are more of the issue that when I look back at my own injury history have led to problems more so than training loads themselves. And I think that a lot of times in physical therapy literature and strength conditioning literature, we're often hyper focused on training loads and acute to chronic workload ratios, and for good reason. But I often think that it's easy to overlook what feels sort of obvious and just assume that like it's adequate. Like, oh yeah, I sleep enough, or I can't, like I don't know. Sometimes sleep and nutrition seem like such um if they almost seem like low-hanging fruit, but at the same time, sometimes it feels like they're things that people assume they're doing well enough in, and or they don't have enough control over. And so it becomes harder to address those, whereas it's like more comfortable to work in this move realm. But I really think we got to get to this fuel and recover realm if we're going to figure out how to get your body responding well to the move that you're doing, because the move is not the issue 90% of the time, I'd say. I think a lot of times it's the fuel and the recover. That's my 2 cents anyway, though. My opinion can change over time, but that's where it is today. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed that case study. It was way too long. I apologize for that. I race on Sunday, so fingers crossed. Hopefully my race goes well. Weather looks like it should be good, which is very fortunate. And I think it'll be a really cool, it'd be awesome to have a cool, have this case study result in a awesome outcome of like a new PR for my marathon and BQ, etc. Maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't. But even if it doesn't, the fact that I'm towing the start line healthy and was able to leverage these element factors that we all know well and believe in, but be able to see it represented in the data too, like using the scissors platform to, because sometimes I feel like it seems obvious to do these things to fuel well, to sleep better, but it gives you a lot of reassurance when you can see that in your data that you're headed down the right path and you just got to keep going. Whereas sometimes I feel like when you don't have that data, it doesn't feel like much is really changing fast, right? Like change happens slow, but then you look back over the course of 4 to 5 weeks or like a course of a month and you're like, oh wow, like I feel way better than I did a month ago, which I do.